Welcome to Heads Up, the ISC research series that keeps you informed of the latest trends happening in the international schools market. Let's get started with our episode.
Hello and welcome everyone to this year's very first episode of Heads Up. My name is Janelle Torres, Research Consultant at ISC Research. At ISC Research, we continuously explore topics and trends emerging within the international education community. Let's start the year by celebrating some inspiring ideas from the international education community. For this, we talked to representatives of the International School of the Year Award 2022 and to some of the top social media influencers within international education. These influencers, who are shaping the opinions of many educators around the world, were identified through analysis of key social media channels, including their followers and content. We have named them Eddropters, due to the impact they have to affect change for educators. And we have published our findings in a white paper report, which is available online at isc4schools.com/top Eddropters 2021. During the course of our research, we had the opportunity to sit down with this year's Eddropters. Let me begin with Vicki Davis, also known as the Cool Cat Teacher. Vicki is a teacher and blogger based in the United States. Her Cool Cat Teacher blog shares free resources for teachers, and her 10-minute teacher podcast is published twice a week. The Cool Cat Teacher has developed a global following, so we asked Vicki why she thought teachers from all around the world followed her on social media.
My thing is that I'm just a teacher. I had no plans for any of this to happen. And I just started writing because I wanted my students to know how to blog and podcast and all that. And then I wanted my students in South Georgia to be able to connect with people all over the world, because I truly believe that we're building the bridges today that the society of tomorrow will walk across. So if we can get our kids working together, that's really important. So I just started meeting educators online and connecting online, most of them before I met them face to face, and it just kind of grew. So, us educators, we have a lot in common. We all care about our students. We all want to do an excellent job of teaching, and we all want to have a meaningful personal life at the same time.
Since Vicki has interactions with educators all around the world, we wanted to know what had mattered to them most in 2021 and what would matter most to them this year.
So in 2021, the conversation was, how do I teach in Zoom? Now the conversation is, how do I teach hybrid? So last year, my school was actually in session face to face, although I had to run distance learning for 10 weeks of that time. So I was home for 10 weeks of that time. So my experience with hybrid has been, I think, useful and helpful.
Since the COVID-19 pandemic has been a catalyst to develop blended learning strategies, it comes as no surprise to find EdTech experts in the list of top influencers of 2021, like Al Kingsley. Al has almost 30 years of experience in educational technology and digital safeguarding. He lives in the UK and is the CEO of Edtech company NetSupport. We asked him what he thought the future held for EdTech in a post-COVID world.
Yeah, I mean, the number one phrase I've used a lot recently is, through challenge comes opportunity. And I think more than anything, what we've done the last 18 months is we've highlighted the importance and the role of educational technology and how it can support amazing teaching and learning. It's the facilitator, not the ultimate delivery. One of my roles is I lead the Employment and Skills Board for my region, which is very much about finding jobs in the workplace for the future workforce. And if we look at what the jobs are now and what they're likely to be in 5 years from now, the totally invested and implemented role of technology within the workplace means that we have an obligation to make sure that children and young people are familiar and capable with the role of technology during their learning journey. So for me, the future of EdTech it's not a choice, it's here to stay. The measure is how effectively do we do it, and the lessons we're learning is about how do we measure the impact. What we want is evidence-informed solutions. With more choice comes more challenge. You've got thousands of products, how do you pick the right ones? Well, actually, the quickest way to pick the right ones is to, as Millionaire would say, phone a friend. It's to actually look and say, well, which of my peers have already been through this journey? What were their experiences? Can they give me the evidence that this solution worked well? And that again comes down to having those conduits, that way of sharing experiences and best practice. So EdTech in the post-COVID world, I think, is huge. The opportunity is massive. And the challenge for us now is how do we embrace it and not just think of it purely in terms of teaching and learning, but think of it in terms of communication, student and staff well-being, and the broader operational efficiency of our schools.
We asked Al if this meant there is no going back to a pre-COVID world.
I think there's a natural persuasion in all of us to fall back to our comfort zone, but there's always a risk. However, for all the tools we've tried that worked okay, there were some that worked amazing and there were some that didn't work too well. If we look at some of the lessons we've learned in terms of, okay, we can have a lesson virtually, but even without COVID, we still got to think about revision classes and children being off sick and recording that content. We think about parents' evenings and using technology, and suddenly our parents that are harder to reach were able to access it within their working practice. If we think about the role of AI and personalized learning, not to replace, but to complement the mainstream classroom teaching and learning, it is inevitable that that will grow and grow and grow. We've also got the one change, which is all of our schools have got a system in place. They've all got additional technology and equipment there. So we've got an obligation to kind of maximize and use that. I do, however, think that the agenda will gradually shift with the recognition that there is more focus on the acquisition of skills rather than knowledge, because the skills are what we need to maximize and get the most out of our technology and equip our learners for the future.
In order to inspire and engage with people around the world, you must be capable of being flexible with your approach, tailoring it to suit different countries and cultures. To learn more, we spoke to Sophie Bailey. Sophie is the founder and host of the Edtech Podcast, and her background is in education technology. Sophie's monthly podcast attracts education leaders and learning specialists from over 145 countries. While talking to her, we asked her how and why she engages with different countries and cultures.
Each country is absolutely different. There are different policy approaches, funding approaches, cultural approaches to education. So it's almost impossible to do a like for like comparison. And I think sometimes people fall in the trap of looking at very high ranking countries that do well with education and thinking that you can apply the approach of a 5-6 million populous country to perhaps one which is far bigger. However, it still remains that ultimately there's great power in learning from one another. So I'm definitely a believer in the sort of knowledge sharing approaches of initiatives like Hundreds and Lucy Crayen's book Cleverlands, which sort of documented different approaches to education around the world. And on the EdTech side, a similar project by Svenja Busen from EdTech Global Tours, who again traveled around the world and basically documented these different approaches. And I think if you then review these approaches with that caveat around context, you can still learn a great deal. And that approach to sort of mapping what's happening is really important. And I think the other thing that you notice through the podcast, which I really enjoy, is it's a bit like the grass is always greener. So perhaps less so now, but about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, you very much had people within a European context looking to China for their discipline around maths education, for example. And then when I was in China, you had certain sort of appetite for our constructivist or constructionist approach to education here. So working collaboratively and thinking about project-based learning. And so I think that's a really healthy exchange of ideas, and actually it sort of helps keep nudging things forward to sort of keep trying new approaches. And then, when I think about the podcast, we've had teachers and education leaders from Kenya and Palestine and Japan and Finland. And also, just on a very basic level, it's really fascinating to hear about how other people go about their education and sort of leadership. So, and then just my final thought on this subject is, that people have a mixed view on the role of the OECD, but I think again at a very basic level, if that delivery of data and mapping of data, and mapping of insight into different approaches allows us to start asking really powerful questions about why things are different, and that's an important conversation starter as well. So yeah, I think it's just that ability to look up and outside of your own context is quite it's a liberating thing, and it's also an inspiring thing as well to ask those questions why. So
As all of our adopters have a strong social media presence and some of our followers may wish to follow in their footsteps, we asked Sophie what platform she would recommend.
yeah, I mean, I think it varies country to country. So I was having a think about this. So I think in the UK, Twitter is still pretty prolific, and there are sort of pros and cons with all of these channels. But I think the sort of ease of use and aggregation around certain hashtags with Twitter is still really effective. YouTube again. So again, there's some really fantastic visual displays of how people are innovating in their education work on YouTube. And again, podcasts, I think, we've seen those explode. So I think thinking about those almost as a social channel is quite useful. I think Facebook groups are also useful in terms of you see quite a lot of perhaps educators sort of responding to news items and that kind of thing. And I can think of some really big brands in education in the UK where they have a big sort of Facebook group, and it's a chance to sort of pile in on different issues. And also perhaps just in terms of actually showcasing your school brand, so using that from the school's perspective.
It's important for an international school to create an environment that motivates its teachers and learners. As we know, this starts with leadership. We talked to Kai Vacher to hear his thoughts on the subject. Kai spent 25 years as a teacher and school leader in the UK state sector before moving to Oman as principal of British School of Muscat. Kai often shares his ideas and experiences of effective school leadership initiatives on social media. We asked him to tell us what areas of education matter most to him.
Well, I think it's two things really, and they are related. The first thing is, for me, it's really important that every single day, every single student should ideally have a positive and a personalised experience of learning in school, where they actually can achieve something and they feel a sense of achievement. And for me, that's fundamental. And I know that we all know people, and perhaps even ourselves, who have had at times quite negative experience of schooling. And that's one of the reasons that I went into teaching. One of the reasons I became a school leader is because I felt that ideally it should be learning. I love learning, and I really want all my students to feel that love of learning, that positive experience. And the second point related to that, to ensure that those students have that positive and personalised experience of learning every day, it's obviously crucial that the colleagues we work with, so that's the teachers, but not just the teachers and those who work with them and support them, that they are looked after, that they are enabled to actually deliver that goal every day. And so that does mean you need to think very carefully about how much teaching you're giving teachers, because I think in many schools, teachers just teach too much. You need to think very carefully about their workload, about their well-being, about the environment they're in, and about how we're working with them and how we're working together.
He also spoke how crucial it was to inspire young people to help them grow to be better versions of themselves.
Inspiring people and inspiring young people. But also, we talk increasingly in our schools about our mission day in, day out is to grow young people who are best for the world. And to grow young people who are rest of the world, it's also important that we grow our colleagues and they feel a sense of professional growth, and that they're coming in every day and they're feeling every year that they're doing something even better than they were the previous year. So growth of students as young people is crucial, but to enable that to happen and to flourish, we also need to make sure that our staff and our colleagues are able to grow as well.
Inspiration does not just come from high-profile educational thought leaders. It is important to acknowledge these often unsung heroes, as they are equally committed to supporting international education. Over the past few years, students supported by their dedicated teachers have been making their voices heard through student-led initiatives designed to provide a platform for students and better their communities. From Greta Thunberg's fiery "How dare you" speech to the UN, to Vanessa Nakate's lone protest to the Parliament of Uganda, to David Hogg's crusade against gun violence, young people are being motivated to support causes that matter to them. The leading causes that seem to draw young people are environmentalism and an increased voice in a world that seems determined to silence them. We spoke to some students from the International School of Zug and Luzern who led some fantastic initiatives that embodied these two causes and won their school 2 category awards at the International School Awards in January 2022. The first initiative was an aquaponics program, which acts as a model for a larger, sustainable alternative food source that the students are helping to construct in Ghana. The project is expected to produce 20 tons of fish and 50 tons of vegetables annually, and will provide food, work, and education to the local community. We asked Mateo Merkel, a grade 11 student who worked on the aquaponics initiative, to explain the project to us.
Well, aquaponics is a really interesting project that was started by a teacher and a few students back when they went to this country in Africa, Ghana, and one of the issues they noticed was that the supply of fish for the local fishermen was quite short. So they decided to revert to fish farming. And the way they decided to go was aquaponics, which is this method of fish farming that is actually quite scientific in the sense that it mimics what happens in nature. And the idea is that you've got fish and you've got plants and you're raising them together in a kind of enclosed system that benefits both organisms. And it has several advantages for both. The fish are producing the waste that the plants are then using to grow, and the plants are cleaning the water for the fish. So it's a win-win situation for both.
Since this initiative was intended to act as a model for a larger system in Ghana, we were curious to understand the impact the pandemic had on the operation.
Well, the pandemic had the first major impact was that we obviously couldn't travel to Ghana, because what happens normally is around October, we'll send a group of students to Ghana to help them build the large-scale system that they're constructing there. But unfortunately, with the rise of COVID, that trip hasn't happened for a couple of years now. And of course, we originally anticipated that would kind of hinder the progress there. But I was just talking with my teacher mentor about it, and really, actually, what it's done is it's provided almost, in a sense, an advantage, because the people there have been almost forced to proceed without us and have almost developed the project. So it'll be at a stage where they'll be teaching us about aquaponics and not the other way around.
Even without the pandemic, a project this size and scale would still come with its own challenges.
Well, locally, I think the biggest challenge that the group had when I joined was kind of the project was just getting finished, I think, and we were trying to get it up and running. So it needed a little bit of manpower. And then we had a little funding issue as well, but the school's been really, really supportive overall of the project. One thing we did do to increase our funding was the group together applied for a grant, and we ended up winning a grant from the IB organization and Changemaker organization, and that really, really kind of boosted our productivity. But then now we're also looking at just other funding streams, and hopefully the idea is one day we could become self-sufficient here locally by selling the produce that we produce.
Along with Mateo, we spoke to Chris Koch, one of the teachers at the International School of Zug and Luzern, who helped guide the student-led initiative, to provide some additional background on how the initiative began.
Yeah, our story also starts with students. As Mateo said, we had a connection to an NGO in Ghana for some years, and we were finally able to bring a group of students there for a visit, a small group. And when we got there, we were spending a lot of time just getting to know the community and trying to understand their life. And it's a beautiful place, and they have a wonderful life in many ways, but there's a lot of challenges in that community, everything from fresh drinking water to electricity to education. Our partners there are focused on education, and so what they've done is kind of turned over a lot of the other challenges that the community faces to our kids, and basically just asked them to do research and think about solutions to problems. So one of the key issues there is that while our partners get kids in school and get them through on the other side, when they graduate, there's not a lot of work for them. Mm-hmm. So and then the other big challenge that they talked about is that this is a traditional fishing village, and unfortunately, because of climate change and overfishing, the fish have largely disappeared. So the goal, the problem that was presented to our students was basically, is there a way that you can help create jobs in a field that these fishermen that are losing their jobs might engage with, and that would also, help people stay in the community? Because of course, what happens is a lot of the younger men, if they can't find work fishing, they'll leave the community and then move on somewhere else, and the village itself starts to die. So our kids came back and started thinking about stuff, and they found this. They're just in their reading, learned about aquaponics, and we talked to our partners and said, "What do you think of this?" And they said, "Yeah, let's try it." So we met with some folks here in Switzerland that are doing aquaponic systems and toured some systems, and that's where we began. So it was a group of 4 girls that led this initiative, and so we built one on our campus and used as a teaching tool for our students so that we'd know what we're talking about when we went to Ghana, and we've been doing a lot of support back and forth via video as well. So they've got 2 systems running now in Ghana that are using plants and fish, and one of them is built next door to school, so they're using it as a science laboratory, and as Mateo said, we're trying to create kind of a regional training center there for people.
The initiative, for which the International School of Zug and Luzern won the International Impact Award, is called Global Changemakers. It is designed to directly connect students around the world with individuals who are leading and influencing action that support the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We asked Caroline Dietrich and Emily Larson, 2 grade 12 students who are directly involved in the Global Changemakers initiative, to present the project.
Yeah, of course. So in general, the vision of the Youth Forum Switzerland is connecting change makers to address the challenges facing our planet. So basically, when COVID hit and we couldn't have YFS in person at our school 2 years ago, we were like brainstorming with Mr. Perron and also our teacher mentor, Ms. Lurie. We're like, okay, let's take advantage of the extended reach of the online world, and let's try and expand mimic the concept of YFS, I guess. So connecting youth with change makers to discuss the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and the students can completely pick like what SDG they want to focus on, like whatever interests them, and then we basically do the connection between the students and the change makers. So we find the change makers, email them, see if they're interested in participating, and then we like match them given what SDG they specialize in and what SDG the group asked to be able to like interview them on. So basically we just provide them with a educational opportunity. We have spread across 6 continents, also trying to get Antarctica on that one as well, hopefully soon, and I believe, and over 250 change makers. So every year we can really see the numbers growing, which just makes us more motivated to keep, keeping this project alive.
Since the Global Changemakers initiative also engages other school communities, we asked the students what advice they had for other schools that wish to emulate their success.
Yeah, so what Caroline and I always say is just get the conversation going. It's really important to be able to speak with your peers and your teachers in school, since this Global Changemakers project was sort of a student-led initiative as well. So get the conversation going. It's important to realize that the youth are the change makers of tomorrow and for the future. So it's really important to take action if you want to see change to happen.
We then spoke to teacher Fabio Piron about how the Global Change Makers initiative began.
Yeah, I guess historically, I think the girls kind of touched on the kind of vision of YFS and connecting youth with change makers. During the first lockdown of the pandemic, we ran some online sessions, and we saw how that went, and we saw that there was an audience and that the students were capable of running these calls on their own. So we said, well, let's see if we can make a team part of a YFS. And so the 6 girls that kind of started it ran the project last year, and kind of the amount of time that they had put in and kind of getting and organizing all the elements to make it work was pretty incredible. And then finally the event happened around YFS 2021 last year, and it was just overwhelming, the support of the Global Shaper Network and the speakers themselves. They were super excited, and many of them returned this year to participate, which was great.
This initiative provided a chance for people to connect in spite of the ongoing pandemic.
Yeah, well, I think now people are very comfortable with this medium of connection, and a lot of the schools in India that we've connected with and these other organizations that, now like literally anywhere on the planet, you can connect anyone with another group of students. And the kind of the opportunities are going to be endless, as we kind of even learn how to use the technology in more effective ways.
Finally, we spoke to Barry Dequanne, director of the International School of Zug and Luzern, about what role the staff played in these initiatives.
Yeah, most certainly. Any success that we see of this nature, it doesn't happen in a vacuum or in isolation. There are precursors and community efforts. Before getting into that, though, I don't want to take anything away from our students. Matteo, Caroline, Emily, they are incredible leaders. It takes dedication, it takes vision, it takes commitment. And without their leadership and without the support of Fab and Chris and others, this just doesn't happen. But what assists with this is the involvement of our community at different levels. So if I think about YFS as a Youth Forum Switzerland as a precursor, who's been involved in that? Well, you have our operations team, you have our marketing team, you have technology, you have all our teachers supporting this from the cricketer side, allowing students to make connections, providing those opportunities for them. We have our parents that were active participants in these programs, whether through our donation program or providing expertise or just being present to support it. And then we have external people in our community that come in. So Chris can tell you all kinds of examples of bringing external expertise, for example, to support the aquaponics project and other related projects around that. And so I think one of the things I'm personally most proud of is the complete comprehensive involvement in some level of, it feels like anyway, throughout our community. And when we sent out a communication announcing that we were recognized for these awards, I did make a point of highlighting the teachers in middle school, teachers in primary school. They've worked with these kids over the years. And in fact, Matteo's project started, Matteo, if I'm not incorrect, it started in middle school with the support of teachers in the program there. So I think it's a beautiful thing when a community can come together to support some really talented leaders that we have here on the call with us right now.
Barry's wise words are a perfect way to end this Heads Up episode. There's no better way to be inspired than to listen to people in the international school community. Remember, our white paper on top influencers of 2021 is available for download at iscforschools.com/top-edruptors2021. You can also find out more about the school initiatives submitted for the International School Awards 2022 on our website, iscresearch.com. Thank you for listening and hope you will all join us again soon.
For more information about Heads Up, including access to previous episodes, please visit iscforschools.com/headsup. Until next time.